So today we're going to be talking about poetry and how to, before we start our poetry unit, we need to decide how to uncover the meaning of poems. So we have to figure out what we need to look at in order to figure out what the poem really means. We're going to look at two poems today. They're both by the same author, Judith Forst. The first one is called Half Moonshine. We're going to do this one together. And the second one is called Raggedy Girl, and together you are going to uncover the meaning based on how I show you to do it with Half Moonshine. So who would like to read the poem Half Moonshine out loud for us?
The moon is the sun's silver mirror. The moon is a chunk of green cheese. The moon is a home of the man on the moon. The moon tugs the tides of the seas. The moon is where astronauts' moon walked. A cow once jumped over it too. Half of these stories are moonshine. Half of the stories are true. The moon has an astonishing mountains, piercing the lonely moon sky. The moon has a goddess, Diana's her name. The moon is 1,000,000 miles high. The moon marks each month as it passes, and has since the world's first was new. Which of these stories are moonshine? Which of these stories are true?
Okay, thank you, Grace. So what we're going to do is look at this anchor chart here, and the reason why we use anchor charts is to anchor our thinking while we're learning, and so we don't get off topic. So in the first box, this is Half Moonshine, and the author is Judith Forst. When we're reading poetry, when we just read the poem Half Moonshine, what we're focusing on is how the poem looks, how it makes you feel, how it sounds, and what vocabulary stood out that was interesting. So first of all, before we go further, when you just look at the poem at first glance, what's something that you notice about the poem and its structure?
It says the moon a lot.
Okay, so the moon is repeated. Put that in here, how it looks. What else would you say you noticed?
At the last two sentences of each paragraph, it says like, which of these stories are moonshine, which of these stories are true. Like it says moonshine and true.
Okay, so there's repetition. What about the setup? What do you notice about why is there a big space between this line? They're paragraphs? What's the language?
Maybe.
No. What's the language for paragraphs in poetry? What do we call them?
Stanzas.
Very good. So there's two stanzas. So at first glance, I think that's really good what you've come up with so far. Now, after reading the poem, how do you feel? Like, what's your initial, if you could put an emotion with the poem, what would you put? What would you say? Do you understand the poem?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you understand it.
Mm-hmm.
What feeling do you have? Like, are you confused? Are you, it's weird? Why do you
Yeah,
say-
like the green chunk of cheese.
What in the heck?
Okay, so it's like silly kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can put that you have a silly, weirded out feeling. And what about how it sounds? Is there any type of rhythm or rhyme to this poem?
Yeah.
What are some things that you notice about the poem? What rhymes?
Cheese and seas.
Okay, so cheese and seas rhyme. And what else? Anything else? Is there a rhythm? Could you match a rhythm to the way that it sounds when you read it? The moon is the sun's silver mirror. The moon is a chunk of green cheese. The moon is the home of the man on the moon. The moon tugs the tide of the seas. Do you hear a rhythm in there? Okay, so we decided that the poem has some sound that we noticed, rhyme and rhythm. And does anyone hear anything else? Or is that it? I see,
New and true.
okay, so there probably is some sort of rhyme pattern to this, right? Which helps to create the rhythm. And we're not gonna worry too much about what the rhyme pattern is now, but as we get into our unit of poetry, we will be uncovering the rhyme patterns in the poems. So let's go on to vocabulary. Does anyone see any figurative language, or is there any vocabulary that stands out to them that they don't understand or is confusing to them?
Green cheese.
So green cheese. What about green cheese is confusing?
Cheese isn't green. Yeah.
If cheese sits in the fridge too long, it gets moldy. Okay. Have any of you, do any of you remember as a young child in nursery rhymes, moon being referred to as cheese.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that's where that came from?
Probably.
Okay. So what are you noticing about some of the sentences in here?
They're what is it called? Nursery rhyme?
Okay, so there's some nursery rhymes in here. So like the moon is the chunk of green cheese, that's a reference to a nursery rhyme. So I'm just noting that there. Also the cow once jumped over it too. Because this is going to help us to understand what the message of the poem really is and what its true meaning is as we take these notes and do this noticing of different words and phrases. What else do you see? What do you think about the moon is where astronauts moonwalked? Is that something that's from a nursery rhyme, or would you say that's a truth?
As a true.
Okay, so we have a truth. What about some of the other lines? What do you notice?
There's fake stuff.
Like what is fake?
The goddess.
Okay, so that would be just fake, maybe not a nursery rhyme, but that's from mythology, right? What else? Do you see any other truth lines?
Yeah.
Which ones?
The moon has astonishing arms.
Okay. What else? The man on the moon. Is there a man on the moon? The moon is the home of the man on the moon.
It's a nurse.
Okay, so we're noticing that there's some truth to this poem and some nursery rhymes. So that brings us to the name of the poem and the repetition in the poem, where it says half moonshine. Half of these stories are moonshine, half of these stories are true is the end of the first stanza, and then which of these stories are moonshine, which of these stories are true is the end of the second stanza. So we're noticing that some of the sentences have truth to them. What would moonshine be?
Fake.
Why fake?
Because they're saying half of the stories are moonshine, half of the stories are true.
Okay, why wouldn't they say half of these stories are fake? What's the importance behind the word moonshine?
Moonshine is like dreaming, you know?
Like moonshine's not like fake, but like a tall tale or something like that.
Why would moonshine be a tall tale?
Because these things are true.
Okay, what's the first line of the poem say?
The moon is the sun's silver mirror.
What does that mean?
The sun mirrors the moon.
Okay, so where does the light come from?
The sun.
So does the moon really have a shine to it?
No.
So is moonshine a word that means false because the moon can't really shine?
Yes.
Okay, so moonshine, there's a meaning, there's a reason why it's called moonshine, right? Because it looks like the moon is shining, but it really isn't, right? It's the sun. So if you look at all the different sentences in the poem, some of them are true and some of them are not, which makes us understand that a lot of the stories about the moon that we hear are fiction, while others are true. So when we're uncovering, if I said to you, what is this poem telling us literally, what would you say?
That some of these things are
True.
true and others are fake.
About the moon?
Yes.
Okay, so that there are stories that are both true and false about the moon. Okay. Now, when poets write, there's always a literal meaning, but then there's always a deeper meaning to the poem. So what life lesson could you take away from this poem about the moon? What could you say it's trying to tell us about life in general?
Something that are fake, something that are true.
So, in life,
Things that look like they're true, but they're not really true.
like rumors, maybe? Okay, so right, the life lesson is not all lessons, you know. Okay, so Mara, can you repeat, what was the lesson that you can get from this poem that would relate to real life?
Some things are true, some aren't. Some it may appear that it's true, but it usually isn't.
Okay, good. All right, so now I think you're ready to be off on your own in a group and try the same technique on a different poem. So if you turn your paper over, you'll notice that there's another poem called Raggedy Girl, and it's by the same author. She wrote an anthology of poetry, and it's from the book Sad Underwear.
Sad underwear?
Yes, there's a poem in it called Sad Underwear. So I want you to do the same work that we did with Half a Moonshine together in a group. And I want you all to be responsible for different parts of the poem. All of you are going to do column 1 together, how the poem looks, you can do that. But then as far as feelings, the one who's going to facilitate the conversation for that column will be Mara. Sounds will be Hannah. What you notice about the language vocabulary will be Grace. And then what the poem is about, you need to uncover that together and come up with the life lesson. So I'm going to let you work, and while I let you work, I'm going to walk around and check on all the students in the class. So I'm going to check back with you in 5 minutes to see how you're doing, and then we will go through it together.
Thank you.
Girls,
Good.
good. So what have you noticed about the poem so far?
That it has one stanza. It's like a compare and contrast.
Okay, what's it comparing and contrasting?
The two girls' lives.
Okay. And so, Mara, when you were talking about how the poem makes you feel when you were facilitating that conversation, what did the group members notice?
That was scary.
It was scary because of what?
Because of what they said, that the girl was in a scary place.
Okay, and how about how it sounded? What did they notice, Hannah?
Is that like a rhyming?
A lot of rhyming. Was there a rhythm?
Yeah.
Did you notice about any figurative language elements that were in the poem?
Soft as silk.
What would you call that?
Simile.
And what is it when you hear that S sound over and over again?
An alliteration.
Mm-hmm. And the C sound, cozy comforter, soft silk. And it's all over the poem too, to help give it that rhythm and rhyme. How about the vocabulary?
There was a lot of, like, it was easy words to understand, and the language was easy too, so I pretty much understood the whole poem.
I noticed something that was interesting, an interesting way to say freckles. They said that they were polka dotting their face, so you get that idea that there's a lot of them on their faces, not just a few, and the polka dot is kind of fun. And when I heard Raggedy, I thought of Raggedy Ann. Did anyone else have any connection to Raggedy Ann when you heard that?
Who's Raggedy Ann?
The doll.
The doll. You don't know about her? Oh, girl. What about Raggedy? What does that just mean?
Like, torn up and
Like dirt.
old.
Mm-hmm. And so when they describe the one girl with snarly hair and runny nose, she's the Raggedy Girl. And the other one, what's the difference? Even though there's a lot of things that they have the same, what's the difference between the two?
She has she doesn't have a scary life.
Who does it?
The
Girl without the raggedy.
The narrator.
yeah.
Okay, good. So now when we think about what this poem is about literally, what could you say if someone said, summarize this poem in one sentence, what would you be able to say?
One girl is comparing her life to another girl's.
Okay. Would you agree?
Yeah.
But what's the deeper meaning? What do you think that Judith Vorst wanted you to take away from this poem and learn from it?
Even though people can like look the same, like their lives aren't the same, and you have to remember that.
Okay.
You don't know what people are going through.
You don't know what people are going through at first glance. Mara?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so when we move on in our poetry, what we're going to be able to get comfortable with is discussing poems, even though they're hard to read, and we usually don't like reading them because they're hard to decode. We're going to learn a way to be able to decode them and have them be meaningful to us and have us be able to read them and enjoy what it is we're reading while looking at them deeply for all of these other elements within them. So thank you, good job, girls. And tomorrow in class we'll be looking at more poetry.